Advanced Financial Modeling, Topic 2, Section 3, Scaling Standard Deviations Across Time. In this topic, we're going to talk about how to take a standard deviation from, say, monthly to annualize it. So going to our data, we calculate, or from our data, what you see is we had monthly returns for, say, capital 1. We can turn those monthly returns using the variance functions and standard deviation functions into a monthly variance and a monthly population standard deviation. Now I can turn these into annualized numbers in this part by simply taking the monthly variance times 12. That'll be the annual variance. However, the annualized standard deviation, let's remember when we went to calculate variance, we took the average squared deviation from the mean. To get to standard deviation, we took the square root. So we had to transform that data by taking the square root of the variance. Now, when I go from a monthly standard deviation to an annual standard deviation, I can't multiply times 12 because of that square root. I'm going to multiply times the square root of 12. So I'm going to take my monthly standard deviation times the square root of 12, or I can use SQRT of 12, the square root of 12, and there is my annualized standard deviation. Now in finance, most standard deviations are quoted as annualized numbers. So I'd say that Brew has an annualized volatility based on monthly data of 46.55%. So in this calculation right here, we went ahead and calculated the monthly annual standard deviation by taking the monthly standard deviation and multiplying times the square root of 12. However, please note, if these were daily returns, and we assume 252 trading days in a year, okay, if these are daily returns and there's 252 trading days in the year, which there are for approximately for stock market, I would take the daily standard deviation and multiply times the square root of 252. So, to go from smaller to bigger units in standard deviation, say smaller time units from day to year or month to year, you multiply times the square root of time. In other words, go from monthly to annual, I multiply times the square root of 12. To go from daily to annual, I would multiply times the square root of 252. Now, I can also go from larger units of time to smaller. So if I had an annual standard deviation, I could divide by the square root of 12, and that would give me the monthly standard deviation. So in this topic, we scaled standard deviations across time using the square root rule for scaling volatility. Next topic, we'll calculate moving average volatility.